Naya had arrived in Ardhul with the weight of 2 kingdoms on her shoulders. A princess from the distant and luminous land of Korea, she was renowned across the seas for her calm wisdom, her voice that soothed tempests in men's hearts, and her ability to read truths from faces like others read parchment. But in Ardhul none of that mattered. She was foreign. And to many in the court that was all they needed to see. The marriage had been born of desperation, not love. Ardhul, a kingdom of hard steel and unyielding traditions, had been bleeding from border wars with the Kyrians for decades. It was not steel that finally stopped the conflict, but silk. Naya's silken arrival, her hand offered in peace, accepted by King Ryer with the same reverence he would offer a quill. Useful, disposable, and not to be trusted. Still, the common people found solace in her. Naya often walked the streets of the capital without guard, speaking to vendors, blessing infants, hearing the stories of widows and woodcutters. She shared food with them during famine, opened the palace gates during a flood, and when sickness broke out in the lower quarters, she descended herself to tend the dying. They called her the Flame of the East, not because she burned but because she warmed. But in the marble halls of the court she was seen differently. Her actions were seen as presumptuous. Her accent, though gentle, was mimicked behind her back. Lady Maraven called her the Eastern Ember, implying she would soon be snuffed. Lord Galdan warned the king that her influence among the peasants would breed discontent. She was counseled to speak less, smile more, and never forget she was there to be seen, not heard. Ryer, once charmed by her elegance, grew colder with each passing moon. He was a man whose pride shadowed his judgment. He had never wanted peace, he wanted victory. And Naya reminded him daily that he had compromised. Her presence was a living reminder of what he could not conquer, and kings did not like to be reminded. She tried to reach him at first. In council meetings she offered measured suggestions. When grain shipments were delayed, she proposed a new trade route through the riverlands. When bandits terrorized the eastern roads, she suggested forming a guard led by local scouts. Each time, Ryer dismissed her, then later presented her ideas as his own. Eventually she stopped speaking. Whispers crawled along the court's walls. That she was a Kyrian spy. That she poisoned the king's thoughts. That her womb remained empty because she performed forbidden rituals at night. All lies. But lies, when whispered often enough, become songs. Then came the prophecy. It was unearthed in the crumbling archives of the Temple of the Eye, a parchment older than the kingdom itself. Faded ink written in a dead tongue translated by flame and time. The priest read it aloud. When the king casts out his flame, the flame shall return with eyes that scorch lies. No one said Naya's name. But all eyes turned toward her. Flame. Cast out. Scorching lies. The words lodged in the court's throat like smoke. Ryer laughed it off publicly. But he stopped sharing meals with her. Her rooms were moved farther from the royal wing. Her servants were changed. Her letters to Korea were returned unopened. The queen was being unmade, quietly, methodically. When a rebellion flared in the southern provinces, Ryer declared war again. Naya warned against it. The people are not our enemies, she pleaded. They are starving. If you answer hunger with fire, the fire will spread. He struck her. The court gasped. Naya did not cry out. She stood, turned, and walked from the throne room, not dismissed, not exiled, but erased. That night, under the veil of moonlight, she was taken by soldiers to the cliffs of Irhar, where the sea sang against jagged rocks. There was no official decree, no public execution. Just a cold wind, a ship without a sail, and a whispered command, let her vanish. But fire cannot drown. Not if it is true. The ship broke in the storm. The guards fled. And Naya, tossed like driftwood into the churning black, disappeared. In Ardhul the court moved on. A new queen was proposed. A foreign girl from the north, young and pliable. Ryer declared victory in the south and celebrated with wine. But the people were restless. The temples fell silent. The rain refused to fall. And the king's sleep grew haunted. In the villages stories began to rise. A woman with fire in her eyes walking through flames unharmed. Crops blooming where she touched the soil. Wolves bowing at her feet. The peasants whispered the name again, Naya. She had not died. The sea had carried her, broken and bleeding, to the edge of the wild lands, a place the maps did not name. There the forgotten ones, exiles, mystics, those who spoke to stones and trees, took her in. She healed slowly, her body scarred, her heart hollow. But the fire remained. One night she was taken to a cave where the earth glowed. There, a woman made of smoke and stone offered her a trial, to burn away all that was false within her. Naya walked into the flame. She emerged, eyes alight, voice tempered, spirit awakened. The prophecy was not about vengeance, she realized. It was about truth. She began walking. Every village she passed offered her food. Children drew her symbol in the dirt. Elders bowed. Farmers set torches at the edges of their fields, calling it the Queen's flame. In the capital, the fires began to appear again, small at first, just symbols etched in ash. But then a great blaze consumed the statue of Ryer. From the flames, a woman stepped forward. Nah. She did not raise a sword. She did not call for blood. She simply walked to the palace gates and placed her hand on the iron. It melted. Inside, the nobles fled. Ryer stood at the throne, pale and trembling. I cast you out, he said, and still you return? I never left, she replied. You only closed your eyes. Lightning cracked. The crown atop the throne, untouched since her fall, glowed. It lifted, hovered, and lowered onto her head. Ryer screamed, covering his eyes. The court fell silent. The priests emerged. One spoke, she is flame. She is truth. She is queen. Naya looked at her husband once more. When you cast me out, you believed fire could be extinguished in darkness. But fire is born of darkness. And I have seen every lie. He tried to attack. The crown flared. Ryer collapsed blind. Naya turned to the people. She did not speak of revenge. She spoke of rebuilding. Of feeding the hungry. Of lighting lamps in every home. Her eyes still glowed faintly. The fire had changed her, not consumed her. And so Ardhol, long ruled by shadows and pride, found its queen not in conquest but in flame. Not by bloodline but by truth. And the prophecy, once feared, became a blessing whispered in every home. When the king casts out his flame, the flame shall return with eyes that scorch lies. The heat was unbearable even before they reached the scorched dunes. The diplomatic journey was a lie from the beginning. King Ryer had stood before the court with a strange smile, announcing that Queen Naya would travel east to broker peace with a nomadic tribe known as the Solari. He praised her grace, her voice, her deep commitment to Ardhol's future. He even kissed her forehead in front of the nobles, a gesture so performative it stung more than his earlier blows. Naya had known something was wrong. The air in the court had shifted in recent weeks. More silence around her, more glances between councilmen, and more hollow smiles from her ladies-in-waiting. But duty bound her. She had married not for love but for peace. So when Ryer handed her the scroll with the treaty request and bade her farewell, she accepted it with a calm nod, masking the tremble in her heart. They departed before dawn. The sky was purple with dreams. A small convoy, just 5 guards, a single covered wagon and 2 water-bearers. Naya rode inside, the curtains drawn to shield her from the sun's early breath. Her hands clutched the treaty scroll, but her mind wandered. She whispered silent prayers to her ancestors, to the gods of both Ardhol and Kareya, asking for clarity. None answered. By midday the land began to change. The sand grew finer, drier. The hills turned to dunes, rising like sleeping beasts under the glaring sky. There were no birds, no clouds, only the hiss of wind slithering across the desert's skin. The scorched dunes she had read once were cursed. No man who ventured too deep had returned unchanged. Some never returned at all. It was there the guard stopped. Naya pulled aside the curtain. Why have we halted? The captain, a tall man with a face like rusted iron, did not meet her gaze. Forgive me, your grace. Our orders were to escort you here and no further. Her blood turned to ice. What do you mean? One of the guards untied the water sacks and threw them to the sand. Another unhooked the oxen and slapped them, sending them into a terrified gallop across the dunes. The wagon creaked and listed, abandoned. By royal command, the captain said, stepping back. You are to be left to the mercy of the sands. She stepped down from the wagon slowly, barefoot, her eyes wide. You would abandon your queen? The captain's jaw twitched. He looked away. The wind howled, lifting a veil of sand between them. When it cleared, they were already gone. Naya stood alone. The sun above burned like a god's unforgiving eye. The sand beneath her feet scorched with each step. She grabbed the water sacks, but one was already slashed open, spilling its contents into the thirsty ground. The other offered a single gulp. She walked. For how long she could not say. The dunes rose and fell endlessly, and each crest mocked her with another stretch of barren heat. Her skin blistered. Her lips cracked. Her royal robes dragged behind her like a shroud. She cried out once. The desert swallowed the sound. Her memories began to blur. She thought of her mother, of long silken nights in Kareya, of jasmine oil and lullabies. She thought of the temple gardens in Ardhul, of the little girl who once offered her a stone shaped like a heart. She thought of Ryer, of the coldness in his eyes the first time he ever said her name. Then she began to see things. A man with a snake's face. A flame floating above the dunes. Her childhood dog wagging its tail before turning to dust. She no longer knew what was real. And then the wind changed. Came suddenly, sharp, searing, angry. It twisted the dunes into teeth. Sand lashed at her skin like claws. Her vision faded to red. Her lungs filled with fire. Naya collapsed. She felt herself sinking, her body folding into the dunes. Her heartbeat slowed. Her thoughts grew thin. And in that final breath she saw it. A figure standing atop a dune not far away. Wreathed in flame but not consumed by it. Tall. Silent. Watching her. Its eyes burned gold and its skin flickered like dying coals. It did not move. It did not speak. It only watched. Naya raised her hand, or thought she did. The fire in her chest flickered once more. Then the world went black. Expansion broke. Darkness folded around her like layers of silk, soft, endless, and suffocating. Naya could not feel her body. She could not feel time. Only the faint echo of her own heartbeat, growing slower with every breath she didn't take. Then the silence broke. A whisper, not in her ears but in her bones. You are not meant to die here. The voice was ancient, not in the way stone is old, but in the way fire remembers the first tree it consumed. It crackled and rumbled, yet it carried a strange comfort, like a lullaby sung in a tongue she had never learned but somehow understood. Naya's breath returned, not into her lungs but into something deeper. Her soul stirred, flickering like a coal too stubborn to die. A glow appeared in the darkness, distant at first. Then closer. Then all around her. She stood, though her body still lay buried in the dunes. Her spirit moved now, guided through the realm between death and memory. Before her rose a throne of obsidian and flame, half buried in ash, and atop it sat a being unlike anything she'd ever seen in waking life. It had no face, only a mask of shifting fire. Its limbs were long and crackled like burned branches. Its eyes were hollow but full of unbearable light. A mantle of embers wrapped around its form, and the sands beneath it glowed red, melting with each breath it took. Naya bowed not out of fear but instinct. Who are you? She asked, though her lips didn't move. The spirit tilted its head. I am fire before names. Born in the breath of the gods, banished to this wasteland when man learned to lie. I burn truth into the bones of those who dare approach me. None have survived. Naya swallowed the fear rising inside her. Then why am I here? Because you were cast into death by lies, not fate. And the fire remembers injustice. Around them the desert shimmered. Faces floated in the ash, forgotten rulers, soldiers with eyes burned shut, children clutching bowls of sand. Spirits of the dunes, devoured and erased. You wish to live? The being asked, its voice low now, quieter than a spark. Naya didn't answer immediately. She looked at her hands, pale, flickering at the edges, not whole. She saw the pain she'd endured, the betrayal, the people she loved in Ardhul, and the promise she made when she married Ryer, that her presence would bring peace. Her life had been a contract with honor. It was not supposed to end in treachery. Yes, she said at last. But not for vengeance. I want to be more than what he tried to destroy. The spirit regarded her silently. Then you must accept the pact. My flame will enter you. Will not warm you. It will burn you from within. Your heart will hold fire instead of blood. Your eyes will see truth whether you wish to or not. And lies will flee from your presence. Even your own. Are you willing to carry such weight? Naya hesitated. The idea of becoming something other than human, of living with a flame for a soul, of never again knowing rest, it terrified her. But deeper still was the quiet anger, not born from hate but purpose. If she died now, Ryer would face no consequence. If she lived, she could become something his lies could never touch. I accept. The spirit opened its arms. The fire surged. It crashed into her like a wave of molten gold, splitting her essence into 1,000 fragments. She screamed, not from pain but from the overwhelming truth it poured into her. She saw her own memories rewritten in flame. Her mother's sorrow as she left Korea. The backroom council meetings Ryer held without her. The blood-stained parchments he signed with trembling fingers. The looks of guilt from her guards before they left her to die. All of it, burning into her bones. The fire wrapped around her, soaked into her soul, and when it faded, she breathed again. Her eyes opened, glowing red like coals hidden beneath ash. Her skin shimmered with soot and bronze, kissed by fire but unburned. Her robes were gone, replaced by threads of charred silk and ember-woven fabric. Her feet stood on molten sand, yet she did not flinch. The desert, once a grave, now parted for her. Naya emerged from the heart of the dunes as the sun dipped low. Wind roared around her, but she moved calmly, each step sending soft ripples through the heat-hazed air. Creatures hidden beneath the sand stilled. Even the fire-breathing winds, known to strip flesh from bone, bent away from her path. She walked barefoot, alone but unafraid. Her eyes no longer wept. They burned. She did not speak. Her silence was louder than thunder. And far beyond, in the palace of Ardhol, King Ryer awoke screaming. His hands blistered for no reason, his room unnaturally warm, the scent of smoke heavy in the air. Wumpro. The desert winds began to carry more than just heat and sand. At first, the whispers were dismissed, tales told by half-mad travelers and lonely shepherds. They spoke of a figure seen at dusk where the dunes kissed the sky. A woman draped in flowing ash-gray robes, eyes burning red like dying stars, her hair wild as smoke. She walked barefoot across the molten sands, and wherever her feet touched the earth, strange flowers bloomed, petals like flickering flame, with stems that smoked gently in the moonlight. They called her the Ash Woman. Old women who still remembered the ancient stories crossed themselves and shut their windows. Children drew her in the sand, red pebbles for her eyes. And men, once brave enough to mock such stories, returned home pale and silent, unable to sleep. Some claimed they had heard her voice, not screaming, not whispering but humming. A lullaby in no known tongue. One that made the firewood crack louder in its pit. One that made shadows dance where there should be none. Back in Ardhol, King Ryer drank more than usual. He told his council that Naya had vanished during a diplomatic trip, overtaken by a sudden sandstorm, buried, likely, with no remains to be found. There was a quiet ceremony, no body to mourn. The people, puzzled but wary of questioning the king, bowed their heads and whispered prayers for the foreign queen who had won their hearts but never their throne. But the king's knights betrayed him. He began waking in sweat-drenched sheets, his throat hoarse from screaming. Guards reported that his chambers often reeked of smoke, though no flame burned within. He claimed it was incense meant to cleanse his dreams. Yet no servant dared stay long in his presence. The air around him grew tense, heavy, like the quiet before a lightning strike. The nightmares were always the same. He was alone in the court, the great halls darkened and silent. Then the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, bare against stone. And then her eyes, glowing in the dark like two dying embers. Watching, judging, never blinking. And around her, petals of flame floated in the air like ash from a pyre. In one dream she reached out and touched his cheek. When he awoke, that side of his face was blistered. He called for sages, priests, desert mystics. Some dared to suggest he was cursed. Others, more cautious, urged him to confess whatever guilt weighed on his soul. He dismissed them all, but they knew something was wrong. The king who once stormed courts with his voice now whispered his commands, eyes darting to corners as if they moved. The court too was changing. The marble floors felt colder, even in the peak of summer. The great braziers that lined the halls sometimes refused to light, or flickered out within minutes. A fog, thin but persistent, began to settle just above the ground at dawn and dusk, something unseen in Ardhol's dry climate. Servants reported feeling watched when walking past the throne room, though no one was inside. The whispers turned to rumors. "Have you heard?" they'd say behind heavy curtains. "They say the queen walks again. They say fire does not burn her, and that she speaks to spirits in the dunes. She's no queen now, she's something else. A flame reborn." Some believed she had become a desert ghost, sent by the gods to punish kings who betrayed their queens. Others said she was blessed by the spirits of the old sands, the forgotten guardians from before Ardhol's rise. And a few, the ones who dared dream, believed she was still alive, changed but very real and coming back for her crown. Ryer tightened his grip on the kingdom. He ordered more guards at the borders, doubling patrols near the southern dunes. He burned entire scrolls of desert myths from the royal library. Anyone caught spreading stories of the Ash Woman was imprisoned. But silencing fear only made it louder. And it was not just fear that grew, it was curiosity and quiet hope. The people had not forgotten how she spoke gently to them, how she asked about their children and blessed their fields. Even those who once doubted her foreign tongue now missed the melody of her voice. And they remembered how the court had changed after her disappearance. Colder, more ruthless, ruled more by coin than kindness. So, when fire lilies began to bloom near the border, strange, glowing things that never wilted, the villagers did not crush them. They planted them in pots and placed them on windowsills, silently praying to whoever had made them bloom. In secret they began to call her not the Ash Woman but Naya, Naya of the Flame. And far from the capital, at the edge of the world, Naya stood beneath the starlit sky, her eyes burning not with revenge but with purpose. She watched the wind carry her name back across the sands. The fire spirit within her stirred, not with fury but with readiness. With the next one, bro. The capital of Ardhol stood tall beneath a dusk sky, its golden domes shining like distant suns. But within its high walls, tension simmered. Streets once filled with song now bristled with silence. Merchants kept their eyes lowered. The people whispered beneath their breath. For weeks, the flame-eye symbol had haunted the city. For weeks, truth pressed at the edges of power. And then, without warning, the queen walked back in. She came not on a steed or with drums. She entered through the outer gates cloaked in sand-colored robes, blending with pilgrims, with traders, with the forgotten. No one recognized the woman with soot-dark skin, the slight limp, and the golden thread sewn through her sleeves. She walked past the flame-eye etched on the side of the baker's house and smiled. She walked past the barracks where the guards laughed too loud, and her eyes shimmered red beneath her veil. Her hands bore no weapons. Her voice held no fury. She was flame hidden in still air, waiting. Inside the palace, the hall was dressed for celebration. The court of nobles gathered in finery, their faces powdered and their fingers heavy with rings. Banners of Ardhol hung high. Musicians played. The air buzzed with forced cheer. Ryer, cloaked in his dark ceremonial robes, stood tall before the banquet table, addressing the court with grand words about loyalty, strength, and destiny. His voice echoed over gold plates and crystal goblets. Then the torches flickered. The flames, steady for hours, quivered as if exhaling. A cold hush fell over the room. One torch flared unnaturally high, casting a sharp shadow across the king's face. And from the rear of the chamber, a voice rang out, clear, soft, but thunderous in its truth. "Did you not say Ardhol never forgets?" All turned. A woman stepped forward from the gathering of servants. Her robe fell away in a sweep of ash-colored silk. Gasps rose like a storm. Nobles rose from their chairs. Guards reached for blades and froze. For she was both familiar and terrifying. Regal and ghostly. Her skin, once warm bronze, now held the hue of embers. Her eyes burned red beneath lashes rimmed in soot. Her hair was threaded with strands of molten gold. She looked like a goddess carved of smoke and fire, and yet her voice, her presence, was unmistakably that of Queen Naya. "I live," she said, raising her chin. "And I remember." Ryer staggered back a step. His lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes flicked to his guards, then back to her. Fear battled disbelief. "How?" he began, but she silenced him with a raised hand. "You sent me to die," she said, "but the desert returned me. Not as I was, but as I was meant to be." The nobles clung to the edge of silence. Some crossed themselves. Others looked to the king, unsure whether to flee, kneel, or cheer. "I demand justice," Naya declared. "Not just for myself but for truth." The king regained his posture. "You abandoned the kingdom," he hissed. "You betrayed your vows and sought to incite rebellion among the sand tribes. You." "I did what you feared most," she interrupted. "I became more than your pawn." Ryer's face twisted. "Ardhol has no room for traitors." "Then let Ardhol decide." A stir swept the hall. Naya took one step forward, her eyes glowing brighter. "By the laws of the ancients," she said, "I invoke the trial of flame." Shocked murmurs erupted. One noble gasped aloud. A younger lord clutched his pendant. "That right is dead," the king snapped. "Outlawed centuries ago." "Not outlawed," Naya said coolly. "Abandoned. Out of fear." She turned to the court. "Let them remember, the trial of flame is no duel. It is no battle of swords. It is the test of truth. In this rite, the crown of Ardhol may only rest upon the brow of one free of falsehood. If worn by a liar, it burns through flesh and soul. If worn by the worthy, it glows with light." Eyes darted across the chamber. Histories once buried now stirred awake. "The fire," she whispered, "does not lie." King Ryer's face paled. One of the elder lords, hunched with age and wisdom, stood. His voice cracked but rang with certainty. "The queen speaks truth. The trial exists. Forgotten, yes, but not erased. And the law is older than the throne." Another noble, a matron once close to Naya before her exile, stood. "Let the fire decide," she said. "Let justice be seen." The hall pulsed with rising momentum. Cornered, Ryer's eyes darted. He could not refuse, not without confirming the court's worst suspicions. To deny the ancient right so publicly invoked would be to admit cowardice, guilt. He forced a smile, taut and dangerous. "So be it," he said. "Let us test your truth, flame-bearer." The Hall of Judgment had not been opened in 3 generations. Dust fell from its iron locks as they were pried open by silent guards. A single stone pedestal stood at its center, and atop it the crown of Ardhul, forged of starlight gold, its edges rimmed with black glass. As tradition demanded, neither challenger could be crowned by another. They must place it upon their own head, one after the other. Ryer stepped forward first. He hesitated, then raised the crown. His hands trembled, ever so slightly. With a breath held tight, he lowered it onto his head. For a moment, silence. Then the gold began to smoke. A sharp hiss, then a cry. Ryer screamed. The crown seared into his skin, burning symbols not seen for centuries. His eyes rolled back as he tore it from his head, flinging it to the ground. His hands blistered where they'd touched the metal. The scent of scorched lies filled the chamber. Gasps turned to chaos. But Naya moved calmly. She stepped forward and picked up the crown with bare hands. The gold, still glowing, softened beneath her touch. Her eyes met the watching court. And then she placed it upon her brow. No pain. No sound. Only light. The black glass rim brightened into golden flame. The symbols once burned into Ryer's skin now shimmered gently on Naya's forehead, as if welcoming her. The hall fell to its knees. Even the king's own guards looked away from him. Ryer, clutching his burned hands, stumbled back. "Sorcery," he spat. "Trickery?" "No," the elder lord said. "Truth." Naya looked out over the court. Her voice no longer trembled. "Let it be known, I return not to claim vengeance. I return because truth must not kneel." The crown pulsed once with soft light. The court, once her enemies, bowed in silence. Bro. The hush that followed the trial's declaration lingered like mist in the grand hall. No voice dared break it. No breath came easy. The crown of Ardhul, now resting in the sacred chamber, pulsed faintly with memory. Its metal shimmered, catching echoes of every ruler who had worn it, and everyone who had lied. Guards flanked the pedestal as tradition demanded, but none moved. All eyes remained fixed on Ryer. He stood stiffly, his composure cracking beneath the weight of watching eyes. The faint burn on his forehead had been hastily bandaged, but the welt still glowed. He sneered, hiding the tremor in his fingers. "A trick," he muttered to the elder lord, "a desert charlatan's flame." But the court wasn't with him. Not anymore. The nobles whispered, remembering the heat that rose from the crown when it touched him. Remembering the stench of scorched skin. Their loyalty had shifted, not with swords or shouts, but with the quiet certainty of fire. A second trial was demanded. The right could not stand with one challenger. Both must face the flame again. The crowd surged into the sacred hall. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering strangely, as though eager to see truth exposed. Ryer tried to laugh it off, but the hall was no longer a court of allies. It was a crucible. He stepped toward the pedestal once more. His boots echoed too loudly on the stone. His face, once composed and smug, now twitched with a fear he could no longer disguise. Even the guards, sworn to protect him, did not reach out. He reached for the crown again. The metal felt warm already, as if aware of his touch. "Do it," someone whispered from the back. "Let the fire speak." With gritted teeth, Ryer raised the crown and placed it upon his head. The silence shattered. A shriek tore through the chamber, not from a mouth, but from the crown itself. A piercing, inhuman sound like metal screaming in rage. Fire erupted, not a gentle glow, not symbolic light, but real flame, blue and red and furious. Ryer screamed. He clawed at the crown, but it clung to him. It burned into his scalp, searing through skin and hair, and the court recoiled as the fire grew. Smoke filled the room. Then came the visions. From the flames, shapes emerged. Shadows projected across the chamber like spirits summoned to testify. Flickering against the smoke, they showed scenes long hidden. First, a younger Ryer in secret council with assassins, plotting Naya's banishment. Then, a document forged, her signature, her seal, used against her to claim she'd fled with rebels. Then, Ryer ordering the death of a child, an orphan girl who'd overheard too much. The nobles gasped. The flames grew wilder. The crown pulsed brighter. More lies were dragged from him. Hidden alliances with desert raiders, deals struck to poison city wells and frame rivals. He'd manipulated crop shortages. Burned letters of peace sent from neighboring kingdoms. Sabotaged treaties in favor of war for his own glory. Each sin the fire revealed came with a fresh scream. His body twisted. The robes of royalty ignited. His hands blistered, his eyes clouded with smoke. The crown would not release him. It clung, molten, fusing with the bones of his skull. A voice rose above the chaos. It was Naya. She did not speak loudly, but the fire seemed to still as she did. You wore the crown not for Ardhol, she said, her eyes calm as embers, but for yourself. The fire has judged you. Let it finish. Ryer's voice dissolved into a choked gurgle. He fell to his knees. The crown finally clattered from his head, now charred black with sin. His eyes, once sharp and accusing, had gone white with blindness. Smoke curled from his mouth as he collapsed. The hall stood frozen. Even those who had hated Naya now stood behind her. Not with speeches or gestures, but in breathless silence. The truth had scorched them clean. The fire had spoken. And it had chosen. The old lord who had once served under Naya stepped forward. His voice, though thin, echoed with finality. The crown does not burn without reason. It reveals the rot it touches. We have seen. Another noble woman, trembling but firm, stepped beside him. Let no voice call this witchcraft again. The fire burns lies. And it burned him. The crown still rested where it had fallen, smoke curling from its edges. No one touched it. Naya walked forward. She looked not at Ryer's broken body but at the court. Her gaze met every pair of eyes. I did not return for vengeance. I returned because silence cannot rule Ardhol. The nobles nodded. A soldier stepped from the shadows, one of the king's own guards. He bent on one knee. My queen, he said quietly. Command us. Others followed. One by one, nobles, servants, even advisors knelt. It wasn't submission. It was recognition. The flame had chosen her, not by blood but by truth. And truth, as the fire had shown, does not yield. 8*** bro. The hush that followed the trial's declaration lingered like mist in the grand hall. No voice dared break it. No breath came easy. The crown of Ardhol, now resting in the sacred chamber, pulsed faintly with memory. Its metal shimmered, catching echoes of every ruler who had worn it, and everyone who had lied. Guards flanked the pedestal as tradition demanded, but none moved. All eyes remained fixed on Ryer. He stood stiffly, his composure cracking beneath the weight of watching eyes. The faint burn on his forehead had been hastily bandaged, but the welt still glowed. He sneered, hiding the tremor in his fingers. A trick, he muttered to the elder lord, a desert charlatan's flame. But the court wasn't with him. Not anymore. The nobles whispered, remembering the heat that rose from the crown when it touched him. Remembering the stench of scorched skin. Their loyalty had shifted, not with swords or shouts, but with the quiet certainty of fire. A second trial was demanded. The right could not stand with one challenger. Both must face the flame again. The crowd surged into the sacred hall. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering strangely, as though eager to see truth exposed. Ryer tried to laugh it off, but the hall was no longer a court of allies. It was a crucible. He stepped toward the pedestal once more. His boots echoed too loudly on the stone. His face, once composed and smug, now twitched with a fear he could no longer disguise. Even the guards, sworn to protect him, did not reach out. He reached for the crown again. The metal felt warm already, as if aware of his touch. Do it, someone whispered from the back. Let the fire speak. With gritted teeth, Ryer raised the crown and placed it upon his head. The silence shattered. A shriek tore through the chamber, not from a mouth but from the crown itself. A piercing, inhuman sound like metal screaming in rage. Fire erupted, not a gentle glow, not symbolic light but real flame, blue and red and furious. Ryer screamed. He clawed at the crown but it clung to him. It burned into his scalp, searing through skin and hair, and the court recoiled as the fire grew. Smoke filled the room. Then came the visions. From the flames, shapes emerged, shadows projected across the chamber like spirits summoned to testify. Flickering against the smoke, they showed scenes long hidden. First, a younger Ryer in secret council with assassins, plotting Naya's banishment. Then, a document forged, her signature, her seal, used against her to claim she'd fled with rebels. Then, Ryer ordering the death of a child, an orphan girl who'd overheard too much. The nobles gasped. The flames grew wilder. The crown pulsed brighter. More lies were dragged from him. Hidden alliances with desert raiders, deals struck to poison city wells and frame rivals. He'd manipulated crop shortages. Burned letters of peace sent from neighboring kingdoms. Sabotaged treaties in favor of war for his own glory. Each sin the fire revealed came with a fresh scream. His body twisted. The robes of royalty ignited. His hands blistered, his eyes clouded with smoke. The crown would not release him. It clung, molten, fusing with the bones of his skull. A voice rose above the chaos. It was Naya. She did not speak loudly, but the fire seemed to still as she did. You wore the crown not for Ardhol, she said, her eyes calm as embers, but for yourself. The fire has judged you. Let it finish. Ryer's voice dissolved into a choked gurgle. He fell to his knees. The crown finally clattered from his head, now charred black with sin. His eyes, once sharp and accusing, had gone white with blindness. Smoke curled from his mouth as he collapsed. The hall stood frozen. Even those who had hated Naya now stood behind her. Not with speeches or gestures, but in breathless silence. The truth had scorched them clean. The fire had spoken. And it had chosen. The old lord who had once served under Naya stepped forward. His voice, though thin, echoed with finality. The crown does not burn without reason. It reveals the rot it touches. We have seen. Another noble woman, trembling but firm, stepped beside him. Let no voice call this witchcraft again. The fire burns lies. And it burned him. The crown still rested where it had fallen, smoke curling from its edges. No one touched it. Naya walked forward. She looked not at Ryer's broken body but at the court. Her gaze met every pair of eyes. I did not return for vengeance. I returned because silence cannot rule Ardhol. The nobles nodded. A soldier stepped from the shadows, one of the king's own guards. He bent on one knee. My queen, he said quietly. Command us. Others followed. One by one, nobles, servants, even advisors knelt. It wasn't submission. It was recognition. The flame had chosen her, not by blood but by truth. And truth, as the fire had shown, does not yield. 8***, bro. The cold lands of the north were spoken of only in hushed tones in Ardhol, a place of endless twilight, where the sun dared not rise and even time felt frozen in sorrow. It was there that Ryer was sent, blind and blistered, his once regal frame wrapped in rough wool and silence. No carriage carried him in splendor. He was dragged behind a creaking wagon, guarded by the same men who once saluted him in court. His screams had long since faded, but the scent of burned flesh still followed him. Where once he rode through cities with banners flying, he now passed through villages whose people turned their backs in silence. They did not cheer nor did they curse, they simply refused to see him. That was punishment enough. For a man who once demanded worship, invisibility was worse than death. The north would not kill him. That was not Naya's way. He would live, stripped of crown, title, sight, and power, in a world without warmth, to reflect on all he had scorched. The winds would howl his guilt back to him every night. His silence would echo longer than any prison walls could contain. Back in Ardhol, the palace no longer stank of incense and deceit. The great windows, once veiled by heavy drapes to hide from the eyes of the poor, were thrown open. Light poured in. And so did the people. Naya stood at the center of the royal square, not on a raised platform but at ground level, among the very citizens she once walked beside. No guards flanked her. No banners waved. Only a single flame-shaped standard fluttered behind her, a red eye at its center, gazing forward. The guards who had abandoned her in the desert now knelt before her, their heads bowed low, shame etched into their faces deeper than any wound. These were not just soldiers, they were men who once swore oaths. Oaths broken under command, yes, but broken all the same. Naya said nothing for a long while. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and placed her hand upon a bowl of sacred coals. From them she drew a brand, not one of punishment but of memory. One by one the guards extended their arms. She pressed the red-hot brand against their skin, and though they flinched, none cried out. A flaming eye burned itself into their forearms, a symbol not of ownership, but of debt. You will serve Ardhol now, she said, her voice steady, not thrones, not men, not fear. The people, watching in silence, understood. She pardoned them not out of pity, but because her justice required truth. And truth showed that these men, though complicit, were bound by fear. They could not change what they had done. But they could choose what they would do now. Naya reorganized the council, replacing corrupt nobles with historians, scribes, healers, and farmers. She invited voices from the outer villages, even those who spoke different dialects or followed forgotten faiths. Ardhol was no longer to be ruled, it was to be heard. The royal treasury, once used to fund lavish feasts and gold-trimmed walls, was opened for public relief. Roads were repaired. Orphan children were given homes in once abandoned estates. Schools began to appear in marketplaces, taught not by priests of power, but by women who had once been silenced. But justice was not a single act. It was a fire that needed tending. She visited the border towns, the same ones where tales of the Ashwoman had once stirred both awe and fear. There, she met with tribal leaders who had been branded enemies by Ryer. Instead of swords, she brought maps and books. Instead of soldiers, she brought artisans and builders. Many expected revenge. Some feared execution. Instead, they found a woman with flame in her eyes and soil on her hands. I was burned, she told them. And I lived. Let us build from the ashes. In the deserts, where her story had truly begun, she had temples constructed, not to herself but to the forgotten spirits, including the fire spirit who had saved her. Pilgrims from every part of Ardhol came to see them, to leave offerings, and to whisper truths they had never dared speak aloud. These temples bore no altars of blood or gold. Only fire pits, always lit, always watched. Children were taught to approach them with questions, not fear. Justice, as Naya taught, was not vengeance that devoured, it was fire that purified. She kept no crown. She wore no jewels. But wherever she walked, heads bowed. Not out of fear but out of respect. At night, she often stood alone in the palace garden, where lilies now bloomed, kissed by flame but never consumed. Her hands, once soft, were now calloused from building, branding, writing, and leading. She touched the petals gently. She still dreamt of the fire spirit. Sometimes it came to her in flame. Sometimes in silence. Always watching. Always burning. It had not left her, it had become part of her. Not in control but in witness. She would carry it always. The people called her many names, Flameborn, Queen of Ash, Lady Truth. But she answered only to Naya. And in every corner of the kingdom, when a lie was whispered, when cruelty tried to slither back into halls of power, when injustice tried to rise again, people lit a small fire. Just a flicker. Just enough to remember. Because Naya's justice did not live in law or sword or scroll. It lived in embers. And embers, no matter how faint, never forget how to burn. 10*** bro. The dawn of the Festival of Truth came with no trumpets, no royal decree echoing across the marble corridors of the palace. Instead, it began in silence, in the soft crackle of firewood being arranged, in the hushed voices of children preparing offerings, and in the steady barefoot steps of the flame-bearer walking into the morning mist. Naya, Queen of Ardhol, had long since discarded the weight of crowns. She no longer wore silk gowns or ceremonial rings. Instead, her garments were simple, ash-gray robes embroidered only with the red eye that had come to symbolize more than royalty. It was the eye of flame, the eye of truth, the eye that had seen betrayal and refused to close. She stepped out from the palace as the first rays of sunlight kissed the earth. At her heels trailed no army, no court, no procession. Only the wind followed her, and the occasional whisper from those watching from windows or behind market stalls. Every year she took this journey, across the breadth of the kingdom, from the frost-bitten cliffs of the northern exile lands to the scorched dunes that had once tried to kill her. It was called the Walk of Flame, and none knew exactly where her feet would land, only that they would. In every village, town, and city she entered, the people paused. Not to bow. Not to chant. But to watch her walk. Children were the first to gather near her path, their eyes wide with wonder, some clutching fire lilies, others holding small scrolls of confessions, lies they had told, truths they were afraid to speak. She would stop for them. Always for them. Her presence was not loud. Her voice did not carry like thunder. But her eyes, those burning red eyes, kissed by a forgotten spirit, were enough. They were said to see through flesh, through smiles, through fear. They burned not the liar's skin but the illusion of their safety. Look into her eyes, the mothers would whisper to their children, and speak only truth. The fire sees all. And the fire did. In a village tucked beneath whispering pines, a boy who had stolen bread approached her trembling. Naya knelt to meet him, her gaze calm, not cruel. He confessed in broken sobs. She did not punish him. Instead, she handed him a warm piece of bread and told him to feed 5 others before feeding himself again. In a port city where corruption had once eaten at its bones, she entered the governor's hall unannounced. No guard stopped her. She sat across from the governor, looked into his eyes and asked one question. How much did you take? He wept before answering. In the capital, her absence during the walk was always felt like winter before snow, subtle but inescapable. The city grew quiet, reflective. People told stories of her, of the trial of flame, of the day the crown burned the lyre. Those who once served under Ryre now volunteered in community kitchens. Those who once feared the palace now walked freely through its gates. Naya's return was never predictable. She chose no pattern, no path. She appeared where truth was needed, sometimes with flame, sometimes with silence. In a desert settlement near the dunes of her rebirth, she came upon a dying fire temple. The priest, old and blind, mistook her for a traveler. I've waited for her, you know, he said. The Ash Woman. The fire spirit's daughter. They say she walks barefoot and carries justice in her bones. Naya said nothing. She took his hand and led him to the fire pit, where the coals had long since gone cold. She breathed into it. The fire returned. And the priest, tears streaking his dusty face, whispered, "You came back." Her legend grew not because she sought it, but because she lived it. In borderlands where war once brewed, she sat with old enemies, teaching their daughters to read maps of Ardhol, not as divided lands but as shared soil. She told stories of kings and queens who ruled with iron, and why their names were now dust. She never denied her past. When asked of Ryre, she said only, "He taught me fire by trying to kill me with it." When asked of the fire spirit, she would sometimes pause, then say, "It gave me its truth, and I gave it my voice." But even queens carry burden. At night, after long walks and longer talks, she would sit by herself, staring into campfires, her hands cupped around flickering flames. Those closest to her said she sometimes murmured names to the fire, names of those who betrayed her, those she forgave and those she lost. She never married. Many tried. Some loved her genuinely, others out of ambition. But Naya's heart belonged to something greater, to justice, to the spirit that still burned inside her, to the people who watched her eyes with awe and fear and hope. And though time passed, she did not age like others. Her hair silvered, yes, and her hands grew slower, but the fire within her remained untouched. Her eyes, still red, still glowing faintly in the dark, became the most feared and honored sight in the land. Artists carved her likeness not in marble but in flamestone, a rare rock found only near the scorched dunes. They depicted her walking forward, barefoot, her gaze steady, her shadow shaped like wings of fire. Children began to chant rhymes before bed. If you lie beneath the moon, she will find you very soon. Eyes of fire, soft of tread. She sees truth where others dread. And even adults, drunk in taverns or whispering in corners, would lower their voices when her name passed their lips. Not out of fear but reverence, for Naya had become more than queen. She had become symbol. When a prince from a distant kingdom came bearing gifts, hoping to learn from Ardhol's peace, he asked to see her. "She sees you," they told him, "but she is not seen on command." He waited 4 days before she arrived at dawn. She asked him a single question, "Why do you seek me?" He answered truthfully even when it stung, "Because my people fear me and I don't know how to be better." She invited him to walk with her, not to war councils or royal halls, but to villages, to kitchens, to broken roads and forgotten graves. By the time he returned to his kingdom, he had burned his father's throne and built a circle of fire in the town center. He called it, the Flame of Naya. Not all loved her. There were those who still clung to power, who plotted in dark rooms, who called her a witch or heretic. But none dared face her eyes. And none could raise steel against her without the flame itself turning on them. That was the pact. That was the warning. She protected the fire spirit's temple until her final breath, if there ever was one. For none saw her die. One night, after her 100th walk of flame, she left the capital without word. No one saw her leave. No one saw her return. Her robes were found folded on the temple steps, a single fire lily resting atop them. The flame in the temple roared higher than it ever had, lighting the desert for miles. Some say she became part of the fire, not just metaphor but spirit. Some say she watches still, through flames lit in her name. Others claim they've seen a barefoot woman walking into storms, into battlefields, into lies. Always alone, always silent, always burning. But the people of Ardhol believe one thing above all. The flame bearer never dies. They teach their children not just to tell the truth but to seek it. To protect it. To light a flame when darkness creeps in, no matter how small. In every home, every market stall, every school and shrine, ISM.